Hello.
Hello there.
Hello. Good. Um, never rains. It never rains in Seattle, but bring an
It.
umbrella just in case.
Hmm.
Okay. Um,
Oh, so you've seen the blog.
yeah, done a bit of research.
That reminds me, I still have to. I've got a new post to put up. The last couple of posts I've put up have been very um, downer, and I've got a couple funny stories I want to tell on there. The blog is a little different from the YouTube channel in terms of intended audience and what the purpose is.
Can you hear me? Hello.
How are the levels on my mic, by the way? Are they too loud?
Hello. Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, it just switched over the mic for some reason. Right. Okay. I think we're good. Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
Start getting the hang of this over time. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think we'll start with why your name is It Never Rains in Seattle, or that's the name of
Yeah.
your blog.
Yeah,
Um,
so and I've been going by INRIS to the people who've been familiar with the blog for a little while. So um, this all started I'd say 10 years ago or so. Yeah, actually more like 12 years ago at this point, where I realized that my marriage couldn't continue forward the way it had been going. And I'm one of those people, and I know I'm not the only one who does this. I think out loud. I put it out there, and how it sounds, how it reads, helps me to better process what it is. And so usually I talk through problems that I'm trying to solve. And likewise, when I'm trying to figure out an awesome thing, I like to talk it through because that sort of helps me to process the excitement. It's weird, but
no, it makes
here we are.
sense because
Um,
then you know what you're thinking.
yeah, exactly right. Sometimes you say something, and in your head, oh yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes out, you realize that really is the dumbest thing I possibly could have been thinking. Um, but you don't know until it's out there, and it's not good enough. I have journaled, and I'm a very strong advocate of journaling. It can be an amazing tool for sharpening your uh, uh, focus and helping you to better appreciate where you are. However, I also do benefit from getting feedback from uh, people. And the problem with when you're trying to wrestle with something as uh, large as divorce, or maybe I shouldn't even start with divorce, but uh, when you're wrestling with how to fundamentally transform your marriage, uh, it can be difficult if most of the people you know also know your spouse. And my wife and I had been married at this point for over a decade, and we had been dating 5 years before that, and we knew each other 5 years before that. So over the years, most of the people we knew in common. I tended to be more of an extrovert. She tended to be more of an introvert. And so as a result, uh, most of our friends had maybe started as my friends, but I also was painfully aware from having seen some friends of mine go through breakups that you can cause trouble by poisoning the well. If you start talking with your besties about how, oh, this is just not working out because this person's doing this and this person's doing that, and then later on you find a way to reconcile and you find a way to move the relationship forward uh, in a positive way, but now the friends you've been talking to are like, yeah, but what about all those bad things you were talking about? And so it can actually, you can end up sowing some seeds of negativity that end up cropping up later, that wasn't your intention when you at first needed just to vent and be heard and all the rest of that. So having said all that, it dawned on me the way to go would be to, um, instead of talking to our friends, talking to my friends, uh, it might make sense to post something publicly, but post it not under my real name. And then by posting it publicly, still hearing how something sounds out loud, it still resonates.
Yeah.
It still triggers the same part of the brain. And if I happen to get feedback, then so much the better, because maybe that feedback will help me to think a little more clearly about things. That's one of the things about journaling is it is such a powerful tool, but at the end of the day, uh, all of the answers, all of the thoughts come from you.
It's only one brain. Yeah.
Right. There's one brain. Now, it really can maximize what that brain is capable of, but getting input from other people as well, yeah, it has the potential to really expand the avenues that you can consider. So, at the time that I was in this situation, there were several blogging platforms that were free, although you could pay for additional features, and that promoted a kind of a community. There was one called Live Journal, there was one called Blogger, and I don't think either of those are really viable anymore. And there was another called WordPress,
Heard of
and
WordPress. Oh, still there?
and this is not an advertisement for WordPress. WordPress was available at the time, and it had the features that I was looking for at the time, and so and it allowed entry for free, and then you could pay if you wanted some
Yeah.
additional features.
This podcast is not sponsored by WordPress.
Um,
Not yet, anyway. Maybe one day.
Hey, I'm always open if hey, WordPress, give me a call. Um, but yeah, what was available at the time, it was a fine platform, and they had a fascinating feature that I ended up leveraging to the absolute hilt. And what happens is you you post your first entry, and they had an engine that would say, if you liked this post, you might like these other posts. And they had a some sort of a heuristic model for finding other recent posts that had a lot of the same keywords that yours have, that seemed to be talking about the same topic. And actually, their engine was really good at finding similar posts. I wasn't aware of this when I posted my first entry, but as soon as it went up there and I reread it so that I saw it as somebody would see it coming to visit the site, and it said, "Oh, if you like this entry, you might like these other entries." Well, since I didn't have any other entries, it was obviously showing me other people's essays. Well, I would click on those essays, and wow, there were other people who were going through the same thing I was. They were asking the same questions and they were facing the same challenges. And then what I would do, since I was logged into to my WordPress account, while I was looking at all these things, I could comment, and I would leave comments of encouragement, observations that I felt on firmer ground providing. And the thing is, when you would post a comment, well, it included a link back to you. So then the people whose pages I was visiting end up coming to visit my page. People who were visiting those other pages came to visit my page. The engine that said, if you like this entry, you might like these other entries, started recommending my posts to other people. And it grew slowly but organically. And when I say slowly, I nonetheless had a couple of comments within the first day or two, and it grew from there. Now it grew linearly as opposed to exponentially, but at the time, I wasn't pursuing this for the sake of fame or glory or monetization or anything like that. I was genuinely trying to solve a problem by talking it out loud with other individuals. And as it so happens, the WordPress formula was connecting me with other people who were roughly similar in age, roughly similar in the challenges that they were facing. And a very sympathetic, supportive group evolved out of all of this. And that was just, it was amazingly helpful as I went through the journey of trying to figure out with my spouse how we were going to move forward. And when I was trying to name the blog, what am I going to name this? I mean, how do you come up with a name to describe your situation? There had been a movie many years ago called Sleepless in Seattle, where people would call into a radio show. This was the premise of the movie. People call into a radio show that was nationwide, and when I say nationwide, I mean the United States. And they would call with their troubles with relationships, and the host of this fictional radio show was giving people nicknames so that they weren't actually talking using their real name. And oh, here's Heartbroken in Hoboken, here's whatever. I mean, I don't remember the specifics of the movie, but I remember there were things like that, a divorcee in Dallas, and so that idea of Sleepless in Seattle, something to do with Seattle because I am in Seattle, and or I'm in the Seattle area, and it occurred to me as I was just running through phrases, the idea of denial is a powerful thing, and when you've spent years trying to make a go of a marriage that is not quite working out, denial is one of the best ways to describe the headspace that you're living in. So I settled on this idea of It Never Rains in Seattle, and for the first year or so, most people ended up in their effort to comment, and how some people, when they talk, they want to refer to you by name. You know what I mean, Owen? You know how people do that. And so you see what I did there. When people were trying to do that with me, and most of them also had fascinating titles for their blogs, Suddenly Seeking, any number of other ones. There was Faye Mom, and there was some others where those were easy names. You could just refer to them by the name of their blog. but referring to somebody as, well, I'll tell you what, it never rains in Seattle, it didn't quite roll off the tongue.
Yeah.
So they would refer to me as Never Rains. They would, or something along those lines. And then somebody referred to me by the acronym INRIS. And I looked at that and I'm like, that works because you can pronounce it. And it naturally is derived from the title of the blog. And so from that point on, when I was using that format, I went by INRIS. And when I was trying to decide what I want to do now in currently in terms of trying to become a synthesizer and launch a YouTube channel, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, I decided to build on the foundation that I already had. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, come up with another name. But because I will occasionally be talking about topics that I know can be sensitive, I haven't done it yet. But when I get to that point, I don't want there to be any confusion or backlash at work or with other folks I know. And so figured build on the brand I have. Be true to myself, but not drag in the baggage of current or former employers, current or former associates, friends, lovers, anything like that. And so INRIS has become the
INRIS files.
The name, yeah. So the INRIS files. It was like, how would I describe what I want to do here? I want to describe things categorically, and so that's how the INRIS files became my YouTube channel.
Put a link to the YouTube channel and blog in the description of this podcast if people want to check it out. Just thinking of Sam was on here the other day. He lives in Q8. It's like if maybe he can come up with one called "It Always Rains in Q8."
Nice.
He says it's 40 degrees or something, 40 degrees C. I'm not really sure what that is in Fahrenheit, but really hot.
In Fahrenheit, that's just damn hot, is what that is. Yeah, well, and the template that I had chosen, because when you set up your blog on WordPress, it offers you a bunch of different generic templates, and the one I had chosen features a picture to use as a banner across the top, and I would occasionally rotate the image that I would use, and on one occasion I had the Pike Place Market, which is a tourist attraction in Seattle, with the rain falling down on it. One time I chose an image of a desert, and there's a lone camel off in the distance in this vast desert scape to imply just how entrenched my denial was, and then eventually I came to embrace it, which is why the current image that's on my site, and I'll probably keep it there for a while, so most of the people who watch this will that image should still be there, but it is actually an image taken from my graduation day from college. They had been forecasting rain for that day, and like a 40% chance of rain. So it might rain, but it might not.
We don't actually know.
So my girlfriend at the time, who had spent a semester studying abroad in Scotland, had come back with this amazing brawly, which was how she referred to her nice big umbrella. Yeah. And we decided the thing to do was we were gonna carry this umbrella, and whether it rained or not, we were going to deploy the umbrella, and we were going to offer the regal British wave to everybody as we were walking in the procession. Exactly right. So as we're walking
with the umbrella up.
Yeah, and we're just waving at everybody, as if, of course, this is perfectly natural, and of course, it was one of the most beautiful sunny days you could have possibly hoped for. The graduation event happens in a football field, so it's outdoors. I mean, unless it were to have rained very heavily, it was going to stay outdoors. If we got some light rain, we were absolutely covered. It turns out the Brawley shielded us from the sun. And anyway, there had been some pictures that had been captured during graduation, and so I took one of those and made it the banner. I find it interesting, but this is why, as I say, I came to embrace the reality of the situation. It never rains in Seattle, but I have an umbrella just in case.
So it's a picture of you just in the sun with an umbrella.
That is a picture of me in the sun with an umbrella, and my girlfriend at the time. And the funny thing is, I know who's who, and I can identify it, but the picture is taken at enough of a distance, and it's also at enough of a time distance to where I'm not really giving away any personally identifying information. By showing the image.
Okay.
Funny thing.
The first time you said it.
Don't mind. I'm drinking water here, by the way.
No, it's fine. So if you're talking, got to be a nice. Don't want a dry mouth. Yeah, I interpreted that wrong. The first time you said it, you said I rotate the picture. I thought you literally just turn the picture around to mess with people.
Yeah, sorry, I should say, rotate through a series of.
I figured it out, but I was like, what, are you just trying to mess with people?
That would actually be very funny. To turn it upside down. But yeah, I think one time I had used "Denial is not just a river in Egypt" as that was the one where I had the desert scape with the little camel off in the corner. But the blog was very successful in what I wanted it to do. It did help me to figure out how to navigate very treacherous waters. The thing is, my ex-wife and I have kids, and so how do we redefine our family with it and maximize all the possibilities for our kids to still grow up happy, healthy, well-adjusted, and we accomplished that. I've given her the name Penny on the blog, so I'll refer to her as Penny. But she and I still get along great. We're very good friends. And we still do family things together. You know, Thanksgiving is it's a family tradition here in the United States, and we will take turns hosting family Thanksgiving, and you know, and the kids are there. We're both there. We'll sometimes have friends of the family over. We do activities with other families, and it's worked out very well. The kids are well adjusted and getting along quite well. When I had been going through this process of trying to determine what to do, I talked to friends of mine who had parents who had gotten divorced. Well, when did your parents get divorced? What impact did that have on you? And universally, everyone whose parents waited until they went to college to get divorced, that messed them up. They really resented the fact that their parents waited until they went to college to get divorced. In most cases, it was because it was obvious you should have gotten divorced. Why did you wait so long and make everybody so miserable? And the couple of folks whose parents had divorced amicably when they were younger were totally fine with all of it. It just was, you know, it wasn't a thing because that's just the way it is. We've got two houses. We go back and forth between the two houses, and we still have two parents, and and it all works out. Um, so that was why I had come to the conclusion that waiting until our youngest had graduated high school would be a bad idea.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay, so the blog, yeah, like you said, it's kind of more of a self-help kind of thing for you.
yeah, it
So
really was.
I saw you had you had quite a large break, didn't you? From what I saw on the blog, it was like from like
Yeah.
August 2020, I've got here, to June this year. So it's
Yeah, and in fact, there were some other large breaks after we had successfully negotiated the divorce and we had found a new normal. I started. Oh, this is fascinating. A community had, as I mentioned, there was a community of us bloggers who were all essentially breakup bloggers. Um, all of us were parents. Well, all but one or two of us were parents, and all of us were in kind of a similar age range. I might have been somewhat on the older side, but we, as a group, uh, uh, ended up, even though we were spread out throughout North America, um, hey, let's get together in Vegas. Hey, let's get together in Vancouver, which is in British Columbia
yeah.
in Canada. And uh, there were several of these friends who I actually saw on I'd say every couple of months I would end up meeting with one of them in real life, and there were several times where a whole bunch of us converged in one area. Several lived in Boston, and I used to live in Boston back when I guess I was. It never snows in Boston, and um, so as chance would have it, one of these fellow bloggers and I connected, and we really got along very well, and so we ended up in a romantic relationship. And at that point, I didn't want to continue blogging about relationship stuff because now I was in a relationship with somebody who was in the community. And so it was that same sort of thing where I didn't want to,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say poison the well so much as pollute the well. I didn't want to muddy the waters. And we had a very good relationship that lasted for quite a while. And over time, unfortunately, it was a long distance relationship, and over time that became harder and harder to maintain as our kids were getting older. Um, so all by way of saying, yeah, there were a couple of very large breaks in there where I wasn't blogging, and I kept returning to the blog when I had something I wanted to work through, and I posted a couple of months ago something that I intend to be the first part of a series, because I'm trying to work through a problem that one of my children has been dealing with, um, and as he's been confronting this problem, and I'll tell you what the deal is. He was struggling in college, and at first you blame it on COVID because it was his freshman year was while the universities were locking down their campuses because of COVID, and he had a hard time. He really struggled with the requirements to do online learning. He's an extrovert, and it's hard for an extrovert to be told, "Welcome to campus. Go to your room." And spend all your time either in the room, going to classes online, or going down to a cafeteria where the food is being handled in a special way, and you got to wear a mask, and so you never really get to know your
Yeah.
classmates. So it was tough for an extrovert to be in that situation, and but he was struggling with the online learning, and we eventually figured out it was because he had previously undiagnosed attention deficit condition that never would have occurred to us that this was a thing, but apparently it had occurred to him because he had a couple of friends who had been diagnosed. But then that led to it led to a lot of struggles, both for him but also for me. How can I support him? And again, this is one of those things where his mental health is not a topic that it makes sense to post on Facebook saying, hey, all my friends and coworkers, what do you think about my son's struggles with mental health? He's, oh, and by the way, like many people who have ADD, he's very intelligent. He's a very sharp kid, and for the most part did amazingly well in school. And so then to all of a sudden be confronted with this challenge of not being able to do online learning because the way his brain processes things, he's always clicking the buttons and skipping past the parts that explain why the answer to this question is this instead of that. And it became a very frustrating experience for him. Well, a lot of people are more willing to talk about issues regarding mental health or neurodivergence or I don't know if learning disability is quite the right term, but he learns differently. And even though more people are embracing that, there was still it's a difficult thing to bring up in public. And once he reaches the point where he's looking for work and all that, is he going to want to confront the idea that he's applying for a job with an employer who does a Google search and discovers, hey, wait a minute, this guy's got ADD. I don't know if that's necessarily somebody we want to bother hiring. So this is why my intention was to visit this topic on the blog, because that's the point of the blog, as opposed to the YouTube channel that I started, which has a different mission. The mission of the blog is, hey, community, let's pool our collective resources and experiences. What's the best way to support somebody who's going through these struggles? But I started with a story that I did, a funeral for a friend, because part of what my kid was going through is alienation. Feeling alienated from the community that you should feel like you're a part of. This was something he was experiencing as a freshman in college during COVID lockdown, but it also extends to when you're wrestling with neurodivergence.
Okay. So the blog. So where do you see the future of this going? So the blog is kind of when you have a problem you want to kind of figure out and communicate with these people and come for a solution. Are you now like focused on the YouTube channel? I guess what I'm trying to ask is there any what's the plan? Have you got a plan to like consistently create on a certain platform, or is it just when you feel you need to figure something out?
I have a cunning plan that cannot possibly fail.
Good to hear.
I don't know if you catch the Black Adder reference, but
No.
Have you watched Black Adder? Is this
No.
How have you not watched Black Adder?
I
I know. It's a little before your time. It's amazing how stuff that I find absolutely hilarious, I'll show it to my kids, and they're like, "It's not funny, Dad. How can you not find this hilarious?" But anyway, Rowan Atkinson is just absolutely brilliant. Stephen King, very well-known horror writer, every once in a while finds himself writing science fiction. He's published science fiction under the name Stephen King before, so if he writes science fiction, all right, he'll publish it as Stephen King. But then every once in a while, he will write very hard-edged crime fiction, and or very hard-edged horror crime fiction. I mean, crime is an essential component of these stories, even though they might be qualified as horror. It's more about terror than it is about horror. And he realized that these were stories that once he had built a name for himself, it didn't feel right to publish them as Stephen King. So he created a pseudonym. Richard Bachman was this pseudonym, and didn't tell anybody that this was the same person who was writing these stories.
Well, you
Eventually,
know.
people figured it out.
Yeah.
And then once they figured it out, the marketing department realized, well, all right, if we continue to sell these Richard Bachman books with a sticker that says, it's actually Stephen King, all of a sudden sales go through the roof. But even after his cover was blown, every once in a while, he would get the urge to write this story. And he's like, this isn't a Stephen King story. This is a Richard Bachman story. And so he would publish it as Richard Bachman. I mention that as a handle for understanding that there are a lot of things I want to do with the blog that go beyond problem solving, and they go beyond here's this thing I want to talk about, but I don't want my ex-wife to know that I'm talking to you about it. There are stories I want to tell. There were stories that came up while I was blogging about the divorce. I had a very dear friend who was very influential in the slam poetry scene, which was a thing in about a decade ago. And she was diagnosed with cancer. And so then her story became part of what I was blogging about. And I did use her real name, even though I knew that by using her real name, I was actually making it possible for people to figure out who I was. That was one of those calculated risks where I just people aren't really reading my blog saying, who is this guy really?
What was the reason?
But there were a number of go ahead.
Why did you choose to use the real name for that one, but not for others?
In her case, it wasn't an issue of trying to protect her integrity. And let me explain what I mean by that, because that sounds kind of weird. If nobody knows who I am and nobody knows who my ex-wife is, then I can speak about her freely. And here's the thing: I have no intention of saying anything slanderous about her. I do not wish to cause her any harm whatsoever. And while she and I did not work as a married couple, I nonetheless have the highest respect for her, and I want nothing but the best for her. Nonetheless, there are things that we do that piss each other off, and I want to be able to talk about those things without there being any sort of repercussions. And if a friend of mine who knows who I am reads a description of, oh, there's this thing that Penny does that just absolutely drives me up a wall, and I'm sure a lot of people would read it and say, oh yeah, that would drive me up a wall too. How did you stay married to this person? But if they know who Penny is in real life, I don't want to poison the well. In the case of my friend, and this was a friend who we went back decades, which is weird when you're writing a story that starts when you're like 40 years old. It's weird. That is a weird time of your life to realize, I've actually known somebody for decades, plural. You know, when you're 30,
I'm not
you
even.
don't know a lot of people who you can say you've known for
I'm
decades.
not even decades old.
Right, right. But when you're 40, it's, oh man, this is somebody I didn't realize I actually knew her for that long. Um, Part of why I used her real name was she was well known in the slam poetry community, and those who chose to look up her information, who looked for her videos on YouTube or her
Okay.
any articles about her, would instantly have a, a background, a landscape to better understand the context of what I was talking about. There were a lot of aspects to her personality that were fundamental to the story that I was telling. By the time this story was unfolding, she presented as a redhead. Now, when I knew her when we were much younger, she had mousy brown hair, and she looked like a librarian type. She was awesome and interesting, but you would think of her as a librarian type. And by the time her story had reached this point, she was larger than life. She wore she dyed her hair this flaming red, and she would wear bunny ears, and unironically she embraced her sexuality without being without using that as a crutch. She was a force that was larger than life. And if you have somebody like that, sometimes the only way you can pay homage to this force in your life is to name it. And so I used her real name. I was in no way impinging upon her reputation, because this is the thing: is if somebody realizes, oh, Penny, I think I know who Penny is. You know, it's the kind of thing, since they've only heard about my ex-wife from my point of view, then you know, that is, it's very, and not only that, only because of stories that I told on my blog, because I'm trying to figure out how to redefine our relationship. That's a very narrow image. So if anybody did ever connect the blog to me or to her, that's one thing. Somebody connects it to my friend from long ago. Again,
There's enough people that could be that they don't know it's you.
well, yeah. First of all, it wouldn't be as clear who I was, but also my story about her wasn't about me, and it wasn't about our relationship. It was about her. It was legitimately about her, a very beloved person who was struggling with a very brutal diagnosis, and it was devastating to experience her story at the same time that I'm going through my story, because divorce fundamentally moves the ground from under your feet. It really does change how you conceive of yourself, your relationship to the world in general, your feelings of self-worth and all that. But then compare that to a much beloved friend who's actually literally dying. It's a perspective
Yeah.
machine that was very profound, and so that was another reason why it made sense to treat her as the real person that she was.
Okay. Out of respect. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Notice how I can take a simple question and take 10 minutes to answer it.
It's fine. It's fun. That's where
It's
the
the
interesting
blessing
things
and a
come from.
curse.
Yeah.
So yeah, she this friend of mine, whose name is Gabe, by the way. I knew her as Gabe. Other people knew her as Gabrielle or Gabby or whatever. But Gabe was influential in um, getting a lot of these slam tournaments recorded, videotaped, and having those not videotaped, video recorded. Again, I'm old, so we used to refer to filming
Yeah.
things as tape.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Uh, but she was influential in getting all of this stuff online, and then when she died, there was nobody to continue keeping her websites going. When you visit her websites in the Wayback Machine, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's a major web archive. None of the videos were preserved because the way the Wayback Machine works is it doesn't store media files that are more complex than a photograph.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot of irony that a lot of that stuff was lost that she had spent so much effort trying to immortalize. But there's one video of her that survives on YouTube, and it is one of the most influential, powerful things I've ever. It is one of the best ways to remember such a profound person. And I do intend at some point to bring her story into the YouTube channel. But the YouTube channel, it does have a different mission. I tend to tell a bunch of stories on the blog, but the blog gives you an opportunity to explore things in more detail when you're writing out this text. You're talking about things like we're talking about things right now. You're not going to cite sources. You're not going to provide hyperlinks and all that because you can't. That's not what the format supports. The format supports a conversation.
Yeah.
And my idea with the INRIS files was initially, and it still is, I want to act as a synthesizer for books, records, or music, movies, television shows. What are the elements of pop culture that are worth diving into? And on top of that, so one of the videos that I've posted that has gotten a lot of attention is actually a book review. It's about Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
Which is it was absolutely the right book to start with in terms of talking about books. But I don't just want to talk about nonfiction. I want to talk about fiction. I want to talk about humor. There are a lot of I mean, the Dilbert books. Clearly not nonfiction, but not fiction, but it is absolutely all about the types you'll meet in the working world.
Do you have a favorite book?
I wouldn't say I have a favorite. In fact, this drives my kids crazy because they'll say, "What's your favorite TV show? What's your favorite?" I collect playing cards. What's your favorite deck of cards? And it's like, I don't have a favorite, but I certainly have things that I keep going back to. I used to read the book Catch22 every few years. I would just pick it up and I would read it again, and I would get new things out of it. And I used to view books as sacred, so you would always handle them so that you never cracked the spine, and so that by the time you were done with the book, it was still in pristine shape. And at some point in college, where it's very common for people to use a highlighter and highlight important things in their textbooks, and they would use a red pen to underline things. At first, I recoiled at that, but then I started to embrace it, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so powerful!" You read differently when you're highlighting or underlining. Well, I have a copy of Catch22 that I had originally read when I was in high school, and I'd say the first 2 times I read it, I treated it like this pristine, sacred object, and I think around the 3rd time I read it, I took a pen to it. I started making notes in the margins and underlining phrases that just really sang to me. and it really is a book that has so many ideas, phrases, names, that just sing. And I would, yeah, I'd reread it every few years. And the funny thing is, once I got into the habit of actually highlighting things and making notes, it was fascinating to read my notes from previous times.
Yeah.
And because I was using different kinds of pens, I could tell, oh, I wrote this during one reading, but I wrote something quite different during another reading. Um, it was fascinating to see passages that I had underlined more than once in different colored pens, showing that, yep, this still resonates with me. And then other times finding a phrase that I had underlined and think to myself, I think I understand why I underlined that, but it doesn't resonate now with me as much as it did.
So is that part of the synthesizing for your videos? Are you like bringing in the bits that have always like resonated you, the best parts, and then sharing
that is a very large part of what I want to do, and I know that Andrew Kirby uses the term synthesizer. A friend of mine and I had talked at one point about performing a service for the Zune crowd. I don't know if you remember Zune, but that was the Windows version of the iPod. And I realize even the iPod has been discontinued now. But this was the iPhone before it had a phone component added to it. It played MP3s, but it was a very sophisticated MP3 player. And a friend of mine and I were like, now everybody has all the access to all the music, but nobody knows what they should be listening to.
Yes.
So how do we capitalize on the fact that we know all this stuff about music? People would love to hear our choices of music. How do we put that together? And Zune had the ability to essentially, it would be like putting together a podcast where you're playing music, but really you're not playing it. What you're doing is you're creating a playlist that includes a recording of your voice talking about, oh, here's what's fascinating about this song. And then the playlist includes the song. Yeah. And then the playlist comes back to a recording of you saying, aha, but what about this other thing? My friend Tom referred to this as gatekeepers, that all formats of pop culture at some point have a gatekeeper or a class of gatekeepers that people trust to advise them on what's the good stuff, because there's a lot of crap out there. So this idea at one point was all about music. A lot of gatekeepers are movie critics. Roger Ebert was the classic synthesizer when it came to movies. So yeah, the idea with the video channel is to either talk about a specific work like Catch22. Here's why you should read Catch22, and here are some of the nuggets about it. Here's what makes it something that stands outside of its time, and it's still accessible, even though it's describing an era that actually predates my father. I mean, it's about World War II. Even my father wasn't alive during World War II. I say that, of course, if your great-great-grandfather may not have been a world. Just kidding. But you get the idea is that this is a book that is rooted in a very specific time, and it would be fun to go into why this is such an exciting and fun and worthwhile book to read. Just like it's worthwhile to read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. There's a lot to be gained from reading these things, but it's not just talking about a specific book or a specific movie or a specific album. It's also talking about writers. Why is Stephen King worth reading? Why is Robert A. Heinlein, who was a science fiction writer, from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Why is he worth reading, even though the science is so outdated now as to be irrelevant? What was it about his ideas that stand the test of time? What was it about his ideas that did not stand the test of time? So yeah, talking about authors, talking about recording artists, talking about genres. And the thing is, I think that there's obviously an appetite for
Yeah.
this on YouTube. The biggest YouTubers tend to be people who are talking about their favorite TV shows or TV shows they hate and why they hate them. Oh, Disney is evil because Disney did this with my favorite character. And the thing is, because I'm a little bit older, and I am particularly interested in the legacy. What is this work going to mean, or what is this trend going to mean 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road? Because I have the perspective of, I grew up reading novels that had been written before my father was born. And or that take place, in that earlier era, and having that sort of perspective, as well as gobbling up the current pop culture. I think that's what I want to bring to my synthesis. That's what I want to bring to the way I look at these things. At some point, my children are going to know about my channel.
I was going to ask you about that. Okay.
They don't yet, although one of them is very aware that I have one and that I am recording for it. And I'm like, yes, I want you to see it after I've gotten my legs under myself and I have something that's worth presenting. But here's the thing: there's a lot of stuff that I'm talking about that I want them to know, and I want them to know that the me that exists today is thinking these thoughts about these things. But right at this moment, it's not something that they are necessarily going to hear.
Yeah.
And it's because their priorities right now are much more narrowly focused. Let's talk about the idea of the artist's way. I've talked to like my oldest, who I mentioned was struggling in college. I talked to him about the idea of journaling, and at the time he just couldn't hear it. He was just like, yeah. Everybody says I should write a journal, and because of the nature of how he takes in the world, he's not at this moment a reader. So I can't just say, here's a copy of Julia Cameron's book. You should read it and then maybe and go through the exercises. And this is going to make a difference for you. Because right now, the relationship that he and I have, he doesn't need me to be giving him, to be telling him, take these tools and use them this way. Right now, what he needs from me is for me to listen to what he has to say, to sympathize, to empathize, and to maybe gently guide him in the way of doing things. But I can't offer firm advice. However, I genuinely believe at some point, if he ends up choosing to have children, or if he ends up choosing to go into a career, that he might find my thoughts more relevant at that point. And when he does, when he's ready, it's going to be there. It's going to be available for him. Now, granted, by the time that happens, the me in the real world could be 10 or 20 years older, could be dead, could be any number of things. But even if I'm 10 or 20 years older, I'm not going to be the same person. I can give him whatever advice that version of me gives him. But this would give him an opportunity to get to know the me who was struggling with all of these things while he was struggling with other things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a good like kind of time capsule that you can capture what you were thinking, and also it's like nice for you to look back on.
that is exactly the idea. It's a time capsule for my kids. The blog is also a time capsule for my kids. My kids, ultimately, I think they do need to know about why the divorce went the way it did. Um, but it's not something you can tell your kids while they're still living in your house, because first of all, I don't want to in any way um, shape their relationship with their mother.
Yeah.
It's her job to shape their relationship with her. When they say, "Oh, I like it when you do this. I don't like it when mom does that," or "I like it when mom does this," it's one of those. Okay, that's really good to know, and and I'm glad you're sharing your thoughts with me. But it is not up to me to say, "Oh yeah, that's terrible the way she does that," or that's. I want them to develop the best possible relationship they can have with her. I want them to have the best possible relationship they can have with me. And airing what could be perceived as dirty laundry, I try very hard in the blog to be even-handed, to say, look, this is my situation as I'm going through this. Um, uh, the thing is, I don't want my kids to repeat the same mistakes I made. I don't want them to get into the kind of relationship where you persist out of a sense of obligation, even though that obligation is eroding everything about your personality, which is not the fact that I was in that relationship is not Penny's fault. It's on me for not standing up for what I wanted in our relationship. Um, and I don't want my kids to end up making the same mistake. But giving them advice on marriage and relationships when they're 14,
Yeah.
it's not quite, And my oldest right now, he's in college. He's still not quite there, but at some point, he may choose to be there, and if and when that happens, I think some of the things that are in the blog might be of interest to him.
Yeah. Just in time information instead of just in case. I was one thing I was gonna ask you was, do you have any like, I guess, regrets or like advice for your younger self, which you think could like
Oh
help
yeah.
other people?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I would say one of those pieces of advice is buy Microsoft in 1984 and hold on to it until I'd say 2000. Um, but as I write science fiction, by the way, I actually have published some science fiction under my real name, and I just eat up science fiction, and time travel is a big thing for me. And I have often thought, what if I were to wake up? I wrote a novel where the premise is 40-year-old wakes up in his teens with all of his life to live over again. What does he do differently, knowing in that time what he knew in the
Is
future?
this like a
And
metaphor of you?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't write a story with that premise without saying to yourself, "What would I do?"
Hang on.
Now, obviously, at some point,
I'm
the
doing
character
something.
does diverge a
Yeah,
little bit,
just
but it's uh, what were we talking about?
like
um,
the biggest like regrets or advice for your younger
oh,
self.
big regrets. Yeah. So when you're writing a novel like that, you do end up kind of examining the idea of regrets. Um, I actually did a video on that exact topic on YouTube, and this, and this is the thing, is that my my marriage didn't go the way I wanted it to go, but I don't regret it.
Okay.
I got a lot out of it. I not only learned a lot, I also uh, got some amazing children who are just absolutely the most amazing thing, and I would never do anything to jeopardize their existence. I in no way regret getting married. I do regret that I didn't learn some lessons earlier that maybe could have saved the marriage. Um, because again, Penny's an awesome person. I mean, she's so awesome. I was willing to marry her, and she's also at the same time so deluded she was willing to marry me. So you know, how can you go wrong? Um, yeah, there certainly there's those regrets of you know, that one girl you were interested in back in college, and then you find out 2 years later that she was interested in you as well, but you didn't. You never took the chance, and so as a result, you know, you missed an opportunity. There's a lot of little regrets like that, but the biggest regret that I have, that if I had a time machine and I could go back and change stuff, there's one thing that I would change, and that is where I chose to go to grad school, which might sound like a weird thing to regret. You know, it's like, I mean, it's like, I regret I turned down this job offer and went for that job offer. But as weird as that sounds, it was a decision I made that was in hindsight. I had all of the clues in front of me as to why I should have chosen to go to one school instead of the other. All the clues were there, but I was so locked in this this mind space that uh, it's all going to work out no matter where I go. And I want to experience Philadelphia. I've already experienced Ithaca. I want to experience Philadelphia. And because when I graduated from high school, I had the choice between those same two universities. And I was really interested in going to Philadelphia. I had that inner city swagger because I grew up in the inner city. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to be in the city. And instead, I went to this college that was in a tiny town in the rolling hills of upstate New York. And um, it was dull. I mean, it was pretty, but it was dull. I wanted the city life. And so I was thinking about that, and I wasn't thinking about all of these clues that hey, if you go to this program in this quiet, sleepy town, they're going to make sure you're successful. And if you go to this other program that is in this bustling, exciting city, they're going to leave you out to dry.
Mm-hmm.
And because I mean, I had life goals at that time. I'm going to teach at the university level. I'm going to be, and I'm not just going to teach at the university level. I'm going to teach at an elite institution. I'm going to be talking with the best minds because that really jazzes me. I just love connecting with brilliant people. I especially love connecting with people who are smarter than me. And what better way to connect with people who are smarter than me than to go to one of these big Ivy League universities and engage with the faculty and the students there. And those dreams were crushed because I went to I went to one Ivy League school for grad school that essentially said, "Oh, you want to teach? Yeah, we don't value teaching here. We're more about research. So we don't like you, and you know, we don't need you here."
What did you want to teach?
Well, in this particular case, so this is funny. Both schools, I applied to different departments. The department at University of Pennsylvania was in political science, and so I would have ended up teaching political science. and probably focusing on national security, what is technically referred to, or at least was at the time, strategic studies. Um, and you ask the big questions like, is the nuclear bomb a fundamental game changer, or is it just a bigger bomb? The answer to that question has profound implications on everything about international relations. Um, and if you don't think so, uh, why did England spend so much money trying to develop the bomb? Why did Israel spend so much money trying to develop the bomb? Why does Pakistan have the bomb? It's not because it's a trivial piece of
Art.
yeah, it's not like, oh, it's just a bigger bomb. Nice to have in the arsenal,
Ceremonial
but no,
purposes.
I mean, nuclear weapons are not cheap. And if you're going to spend the money on a nuclear program, how many things are you not spending that money on that are vital to the survival of your country, your planet? So that's one thing. The other school, the other department that I applied to was the Department of Communications at Cornell. And the thing about the Department of Communications was, at that time, they had not had a PhD program for like 10 or 20 years, and they were restarting their PhD program. So what they said was, you have a very strong application here. It is very important to us that we build a strong name in the field of communications. And as a result, it is very important to us that our first few classes produce successful PhDs who go out there and influence the world. We're going to make sure you have everything you need to be successful. And I didn't get it at that point, how rare that is in academia, and actually how rare that is in life. This is why, if you do choose to get married, your choice in who you're going to get married to is so important. Are they going to help you be successful, or are they going to hold you back? Are they going to hold you down? Are they going to make you a better you, or are they going to appear to your worst instincts? So, do I have a regret? Yeah, that was the regret. And I will say this about, like the person I married, she did genuinely want me to be to realize my potential. From that standpoint, she actually was a good person to marry, and I wanted her to live up to her potential. I would like to think that I was a reasonable match as well. The real regret is, I torpedoed my opportunity to go into a career that I, to this day, think I would have enjoyed far more than. It's essentially the synthesizer role at a university, where you decide which of the books that my students should be reading so that we can have these great conversations about these topics.
Okay. So what are you doing now?
So yeah.
Hang on, actually, just conscious of the time, we've been going for over an hour. You could just keep going.
Have we? Oh my goodness, we have been going for over an hour. Sorry about that.
It's fine.
I'm fine. I'm fine with going. Let's go a little bit longer.
Okay.
I do think it's funny. I know you can't. My windows are in a different direction, but it is pitch black outside here because it's coming up on 1 a.m. in Seattle.
Oh wow.
I'm looking out your window and I'm seeing daylight.
Sun's coming up. You can go to bed if you want. Don't want you to be tired.
Yeah, no. I'm a night owl. This is actually I love connecting with my friends in Europe, because especially the ones who are morning people, because I can catch you while you're at your peak and I'm at my peak, and we can talk about great ideas. And I don't know. I've always been more of a night owl.
Okay.
But that's. But you were asking what I do
Currently
now.
do, yeah.
So this is fascinating. You know what? I say this is fascinating. It's fascinating to me. I don't know if it's fascinating to you. When I was applying to colleges, and I don't know if I've actually told this story on the video channel. I don't think I have yet. When I was
Exclusive.
looking, actually, I might have, because my very first video was about was Cornell a good choice for me for undergrad? And the reason I made that video was because, first of all, if you're going to be a synthesizer, if you're going to make videos, you got to start by making videos.
Yep.
And at that particular time, I was looking into colleges for child number 2 and comparing notes with child number 1. And so I was watching a lot of YouTube videos about was Harvard worth it? Was Yale worth it? Was Imperial College worth it? Was Cambridge worth it? And I was just eating that stuff up. It's fascinating to hear what people have to say. And there was somebody who posted a video, and she's actually, at the time that she posted the video, still a student at Cornell, and she was like, "Was going to Cornell worth it?" And there was a lot of information out there, and I was like, the thing is, though, these are kids who are either still in school or they've only been out of school for a couple of years. Maybe your old synthesizer here can lend a little bit of perspective to, what about decades later? Was it worth it? But I had when I was looking into colleges, I was all about computers. And so I chose to go to Cornell because they were one of 4 universities in the world that had what was called a supercomputer. Now, this computer took up the better part of a building, and this computer made by Apple that I carry in my pocket with me every day has more computing power than that supercomputer that I wanted to get my hands on when I was going to college. And when I got to college, I discovered that there are a lot more interesting things to take classes in than computers. So I took classes in history, and I took classes in sociology, psychology, and anthropology, and all these ologies, which was awesome. I studied Russian language, and eventually I studied German language. I studied Russian history, American history, and European history, and then so I ended up a dual major as an undergrad.
Kannst du
Russian and
Deutsch
Soviet
sprechen?
studies. What's that?
Kannst du Deutsch sprechen?
I have forgotten how to say I have forgotten more. It's hilarious.
Ich habe vergessen.
I mean, I understand what you're what you're asking.
Yeah.
But no, I remember enough to be able to understand, but I can't even come up with the word for forgotten.
Vergessen,
I remember.
think.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
What about Russian?
But yeah. Now in Russian, I can say "Я забил больше, чем я знал". Я занимался русским языком, когда я был в Корнельском университете, и я жил в Москве. I studied Russian language at the Institute Stali Splava in Moscow for a summer. I got to spend the White Nights in Leningrad because it was still the Soviet Union. That's how old I am. I'm a country ago. I while I was there, I acquired a map of the world that you would put on your wall. It was a map of the world and it was in Russian, and the Soviet Union was pink. Now, this is funny because in the United States, people used to refer to communists as pinkos. I don't know why, but I just loved the irony of having a world map that had the Soviet Union as pink. Um, However, and I managed to carry, you roll it up in a tube and then you're carrying this tube, and I managed to bring that tube all the way back to the United States. It moved with me from Boston, because I lived in Boston for a while, and it moved to Philadelphia when I was in college in Philadelphia, and back to Boston, and then to Seattle, and back to Boston, and then it got lost, and I don't have the map anymore, and I'm very sad because no, within a couple of years, that map, none of the countries in the Eastern Bloc existed anymore. The Soviet Union didn't exist anymore. Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, all those countries were gone. So I studied all this stuff that had nothing to do with computers when I was in college. Then when I went to grad school, I studied political science. Nothing to do with computers. And then I ran away from grad school, which again was the story I had told in that video about my biggest regret. And after I ran away, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I don't have a PhD. I can't go teach at a university. I can't even teach at a community college for all that. I could, I suppose I could get a certificate and I could teach math at the grade school level, which, by the way, I did at one point. But I'm like, I don't know. What am I going to do? Well, while I was in college, even though I didn't take classes in computers, I worked on computers for my campus jobs. I worked as a programmer for the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics because they were building software to teach Russian. How do you type on a Russian keyboard? And there was this thing called hypertext markup language, HTML.
Yeah.
And this was something that you could use. You could hover your mouse over a word in Russian, and then it would bring up the English
Translation.
word.
Mm-hmm.
And it would bring up the translation, and it would bring up another example of using that word in a sentence. And now I didn't design the software; somebody else designed it. But then I learned HTML, and then I started doing the markup to make this thing work. Well, as a result, I had skills in building websites because websites are HTML is the fundamental building block for website. And I had skills in computer programming. And so very soon after I fled academia, I ended up working in computers. And I've been working in computers on and off ever since then. I did work in radio for a while. Radio does not pay particularly well. Actually, working in radio is part of what made me attractive to the communications school at Cornell. But radio doesn't pay well. Computer work that paid well. And the interesting thing too about computer work is you don't have to have a degree in software engineering to be a software engineer. Mm-hmm. It may not stay that way forever. I mean, Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer who never went to law school. It used to be doctors didn't have to go to med school. They just, they apprenticed for some other doctor. And, eventually computer programming is probably going to become similarly regimented and regulated and all the rest of that. But right now we live in an age where if you've got the computer skills, it doesn't matter what your degree says.
That's interesting, because I feel like as long as you can do what they want, they're probably still going to accept you.
Yeah.
A lot of companies are almost moving kind of away. I think people like Google, they're not so focused on degrees anymore.
Yep. They never were, actually. Microsoft was founded by a dropout, a college dropout. Bill Gates never finished his Harvard degree. Now, granted, he was smart enough to get into Harvard. I mean, he had something going on, but he never got his degree. And so I did work for Microsoft for a period of time. I probably shouldn't even admit that, but yes, I did at one point work for any number of very large, well-known computer companies. I've also worked for a number of small ones that nobody's ever heard of.
Well, you're pseudonymous, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and that's the thing is, I don't think I'm ever going to work for Microsoft again, but I also don't want to, I don't want to get anybody into trouble or get myself into trouble or jeopardize possible future employment with Microsoft. But anybody who has spent a lot of time working in the software industry has probably worked for a couple of the really large corporations as well as a couple of startups. And I certainly am in that camp right at the moment. I happen to be working for a larger company, not Microsoft. And certainly I have that entrepreneurial spirit. I've started companies before. I could end up consulting or I could end up starting up another small company again and turning it into a big company and becoming obscenely wealthy. And I'm all in favor of selling out. But today I've got children who need to go to college or need to go to high school or need to go wherever, and they need shoes and they need food and of course they need video games and junk food.
It's about need.
So I right at the moment I sell my hours to a corporation, and then I use some of my other hours to talk with brilliant folks such as yourself.
Very kind. Yeah, I'm just conscious. I don't think my computer's got that much more space, so we can't go on too much longer.
Oh, well, and again, you asked a very straightforward question. What do you do now? And I took about 45 minutes to tell you my life story about choosing colleges and all this, all by way of saying, yeah, I'm a computer programmer who hasn't taken a computer programming class since high school, and it's working out. Me. And you're running out of space on your computer, and you probably have things to do yourself. I mean, you probably want to get out there before it gets dark as well. I should probably since I have a job that I have to go to, I should probably get to sleep so that I get at least 3 hours of my beauty rest before I show up for my employer.
I've got maybe like one more question, or
lay it on me.
Another half an hour. Get ready. Right. You can pass this if you want, but what do you think makes a successful marriage versus an unsuccessful one?
That is a fascinating question, and I know a lot of people who have had or have awesome marriages. I will point out, and this is something I will tell anybody who will listen, half of marriages in the modern Western world end in divorce, and the other half end in death. So really there's no happy endings here. So if you go in knowing that, if you go in knowing that the deck is stacked against you, enjoy the ride. But part of it depends upon how you're going to define success. But I think we all in general have this basic idea, this fundamental idea of a successful marriage means that you can go through the years sharing a life with somebody who you enjoy sharing your life with. I don't know any of us who has any friend who's been a friend for any period of time where you haven't had periods where you're mad at each other, where you can't stand the sight of each other. If you've had a friend for 10 years and you've never had that kind of a falling out, I don't think you know each other very well. When you get married, you're gonna get to know somebody well enough to where, yeah, every once in a while you'll be unhappy with each other. But
You gotta fix it quick, do you think?
uh, one piece of advice that I read, because as I may have implied, I read a lot, and when I was going through my own dissolution of my marriage, I was reading a lot of self-help books and not romance, but romantic advice. I also was reading romance novels because, and there's a lot of money to be made writing romance novels. Uh, I've been writing science fiction, but the real money's in romance.
People want
So
something.
it would be hilarious for someone as cynical as I am to be writing a romance novel, and I think I could pull it off.
Maybe you should do
But
it.
uh, oh, we're laughing about it now, but it could happen.
Yeah,
And
no,
when it
seriously.
does, I'll be publishing it under another name because I don't want to. Anyway,
Stephen King.
did you? Most romance writers publish under pseudonyms. Nora Roberts and J.D. Rob. So J.D. Robb is a science fiction writer. Nora Roberts is a romance writer. They're both the same person. Um, they both happen to be Nora Roberts, but that's neither here nor there. The best piece of advice I read while I was going through the whole thing uh, was written by a guy who is a practicing psychologist, and as a psychologist, he was involved in a lot of talk therapy, and he's like, when you've been working at this job for as long as I have, you just don't hear original stories anymore about, oh, my spouse this, and oh, my sweetheart that, they ruined my life because they're treating me blah blah blah. And he's like, you know what, there's nothing more boring than to hear your sob story about why your relationship sucks. um Here's the truth of the matter. And by the way, this guy, the author of this book, I wish I could remember his name, because if I'm going to be a good synthesizer, I'm going to have to be able to spout off these names, the titles of the books. But he wrote a series of little advice books that were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He had been through a divorce, and he was on a successful second marriage. He said, here's what it all comes down to. You know, right at the very beginning, if this is the right person. It all comes down to this: choose well. Whether your marriage is going to succeed or not, it all is going to depend upon, did you choose the right person? And you're going to have enough clues as a general rule to get a sense of whether you've chosen the right person. Now I realize there are going to be people who are saying, I thought he was the best person in the world, and then he took all my money and he ran off with my younger sister. And I totally get that. There are stories like that, and so one of my best friends today is somebody whose husband turned out to be a narcissist and all this stuff, and she didn't see that. She didn't see it coming until she had been married for 20 years. And there's no undoing a mistake like that. But that said, I'm not trying to blame the victim here, but I am saying that it all comes down to I believe it comes down to choosing the right person. uh, and when it comes to choosing the right person, a lot of it is the person kind? Is the person supportive of the person you want to be? Do they bring out the best in you? Do you bring out the best in them? And if the answer to those questions are yes, you're probably already ahead of the game. I mentioned that, first of all, I still have a great relationship with my ex-wife, because the answer to those questions were yes. And even though we did not end up with a successful marriage, we gave it a really good shot. And likewise, the long-term relationship I had after that, a good person, kind, intelligent, thoughtful, who wants to make people better, and she made me better. She brought out my better qualities. I think I brought out her better qualities, and I think that's why we lasted for as long as we did, even though we lived so many miles apart for so long.
Okay, so
Yeah.
do you think it's possible that people change? Because would you say, like, looking back, that you now think, oh, there were perhaps signs that in the beginning, or do you think people are a
You
bit
have just asked one of the fundamental questions of my life. The longest debate that I have had running with a friend of mine from back when I was in high school
just don't know?
comes down to, can people change? Do people change? Her contention is the answer is no, and my contention is the answer is yes. Yes, people can change. And sometimes it can turn out that they do not change for the better. Sometimes they change for the worse. Um, and there can be a number of reasons that people change. And they're not always within our control, and they're not always environmental factors that you could say, oh yeah, he was in a car accident and bashed his head, and he's been an angry drunk ever since then. I think that yeah, it is possible, and so and that does call into question the whole idea of choose well. But choosing well is still a great starting point. I believe people can change, and this is a topic. If I haven't started to address it on my channel, have I already started to address this on my channel? And you're throwing me a softball.
I haven't watched all your videos, so I haven't seen this on your channel. I don't know.
Well, good. So now there's still stuff for you to look forward to. But this is a question I'm going to be coming back to more and more as the videos unfold, because not only do I also want to present my friend's position that people don't change. And I need to present it honestly, fairly, and show her evidence for why people don't change, so that I can tear it down and demonstrate why she's wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, people
That's
can
interesting.
totally change.
I think maybe also. I mean, I'm not really an expert on marriage, but I feel like if you have a problem, you want to try and like fix it as soon as possible instead of like let it kind of get worse. But
Yeah, that's
I really am
absolutely true.
conscious of this just like running out of space. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Do you have?
Are you going to lose the entire conversation?
I don't know.
Well, we should probably wrap it up.
Do you have just one thing I wanted. Do you have McCoy on hand? The skeleton.
Oh yes, I do.
I thought he would. I'd like to have him feature on the podcast as well.
All right. Well, and I'll bet he would make an excellent thumbnail. For those of us, when McCoy made a brief appearance in the one video that I did, it was just for the sake of being able to show McCoy in a thumbnail. But I don't know if you noticed my shirt, people, but these are pirate skulls and skeletons. These were all featured on pirate flags back in the day. But let me show you my friend McCoy. He's called McCoy. What was the nickname of Dr. McCoy from Star Trek? You know who Dr. McCoy is from Star Trek?
No.
All right. Dr. McCoy was the doctor on the Starship Enterprise, and Captain Kirk always called him Bones. So, speaking of Bones, here's Bones. Right now, Bones is wearing one of my dress shirts, one of my black button downs. This is McCoy.
So he helps you come up with video ideas, is that right?
Yes. McCoy and I have long conversations into the wee hours about philosophy and computer repair. So there we go.
Oh yeah, like how they say with coders. I heard when I've done it, like they talk to ducks. You heard of that? You speak to the duck.
I haven't heard of that, but I
speak to a rubber duck and think through your problem and saying it out loud.
I have a rubber duck just in the other room. It's funny you should mention that. Yeah, maybe that's a cliche of us, but I still have kids living at home, even though I've got one at college, and so what happens is, like tonight, the kids are at Penny's house. When they come back tomorrow, McCoy is going to be this is like the elf on the shelf thing. McCoy is going to be somewhere in this house doing something, and the kids are gonna walk into a room, and like they're gonna walk into the bathroom, and there's McCoy sitting on the toilet, but yeah, and then they're going to move McCoy, and at some point I'm gonna go. This happened the other day. I went to get into bed, and McCoy was already in bed, and that was funny.
Yeah, sounds fun. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up here. So,
all right,
the links at the INRIS files on YouTube. It Never Rains in Seattle is the blog. Is there anywhere else you want people to, or if they want to check out your work?
Those are the good ones. And the blog, you can actually get to it just by typing itneverrainsinseattle.com, and that will forward you right to the WordPress blog. Right now we've got the INRIS files. There will probably be another INRIS channel at some point. Okay. Because I have ideas for a third outlet, but these two outlets, yeah, they're going to contain different kinds of things.
Okay.
And Owen, thank you so very much. You've given me an opportunity to talk about myself, which I never get to do, and clearly I've had a lot of practice talking about myself, which is not a good sign. But McCoy is a good listener.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I think it's definitely helped some people.
Thank you very much. And and by the way, if anybody wants to reach out to me and ask any questions directly, itneverrainsinseattle@gmail.com.
Awesome. We'll put that in as well. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Have
Cheers.
a good night.
Thanks a lot. You enjoy your day.
Bye.